You know that specific heavy feeling in your chest when 5 p.m. rolls around on a Friday and you remember you made plans. You promised you'd go to that dinner or that party or that networking event 3 days ago when you were feeling energetic. But now, the time has come, and every cell in your body is screaming at you to stay on the couch. You pick up your phone, type out a vague excuse about a headache or a sudden family issue, hit send, and then relief. A wave of pure, unadulterated euphoria washes over you. You aren't sick. You aren't sad. You are just finally free. If this sounds like you have likely spent your life being told that you are flaky, antisocial, or boring. Society tells us that the good life happens out there, under the strobe lights, in the crowded bars, in the constant hustle of connection. But what if I told you that your desire to stay home isn't a personality flaw, but a biological imperative? What if your canceled plans are actually a sophisticated form of self-preservation? Today, we are going to dismantle the myth of the lazy homebody and explore the fascinating psychology of why some of us are simply wired to find paradise in our pajamas. To understand why you crave the sanctuary of home, we have to look at the neuroscience of stimulation. This goes far beyond the basic labels of introvert and extrovert. It comes down to a concept psychologists call optimal arousal theory. Every human brain has a sweet spot of stimulation where it functions best. For extroverts, their baseline level of arousal is naturally lower. To feel normal or alive, they need to crank up the volume. Loud music, new faces, unpredictable environments. And high-energy social interactions boost their dopamine levels to that sweet spot. But if you are someone who prefers home, your baseline is likely different. Your internal world is already naturally high stimulation. You process stimuli, lights, sounds, emotions, micro-expressions, much more deeply and intensely than others. This is often linked to being a highly sensitive person, or HSP. For you, a crowded room isn't just fun, it is a sensory assault. Your brain is processing the flickering light in the corner, the overlapping conversations, the smell of the food, and the emotional energy of the person standing next to you all at once. When you retreat home, you aren't hiding. You are engaging in sensory regulation. You are returning to a controlled environment where you can lower the volume of the world so your nervous system doesn't blow a fuse. There is also a profound psychological element of control at play here. The outside world is inherently chaotic and unpredictable. You cannot control the traffic, the awkward small talk with a stranger, or the temperature of the room. This unpredictability triggers a low-level fight-or-flight response in many people. But home is the kingdom of the known. You control the lighting. You control the soundtrack. You control who enters your space. For a brain that is constantly calculating social dynamics and processing information, this control isn't a luxury. It is the only way to turn off the vigilance system. It allows your cortisol levels to drop and your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, to finally take over. Furthermore, we need to talk about the social battery as more than just a metaphor. It is a very real cognitive resource. Every interaction requires emotional labor, the psychological effort to present yourself, read social cues, and manage your reactions. For some, this battery drains slowly. For the homebody, it drains rapidly because the depth of processing is so much greater. When you are alone, you enter a state of autonomy. You no longer have to perform. You don't have to smile when you aren't happy or nod when you aren't listening. The sheer exhaustion many people feel isn't physical tiredness. It is performance fatigue. Staying home is the act of dropping the mask. However, there is a hidden superpower in this preference for solitude that society often overlooks. Neuroscience suggests that the default mode network of the brain, the part responsible for daydreaming, creativity, and deep introspection, is most active during solitary rest, While the world praises the doers, the thinkers are often the ones staying home. History's greatest writers, artists, and innovators were often notorious homebodies. Why? Because boredom and silence are the incubators of brilliance. When you aren't distracted by the noise of the outside world, your brain starts to make connections it otherwise wouldn't. That thought spiral at 2 a.m. isn't just noise, it's your brain processing the complexity of life. You aren't missing out on the world, you are building a richer one inside your head. Now, a crucial distinction must be made, and this is where we have to be honest with ourselves. There is a difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude is a choice. It is restorative and leaves you feeling energized. Isolation is often driven by fear, social anxiety, depression, or avoidance, and leaves you feeling drained and lonely. If you stay home because you love your own company, that is power. If you stay home because you are terrified of the world, that is a cage. It is important to check in with yourself. Are you running towards peace or running away from discomfort? If it's the former, embrace it without an ounce of guilt. So, how do we navigate a world that demands we be always on? First, reframe your flaking as boundary setting. Instead of making plans you know you'll cancel, practice the maybe. Tell friends, I've had a long week, so I'm going to play it by ear. But more importantly, stop apologizing for your nature. You do not need an excuse like a fever or a family emergency to stay home. I need to rest is a complete sentence. Second, curate your environment intentionally. Since your psychology relies on sensory control, make your home a true sanctuary. This isn't about interior design. It's about nervous system regulation. Soft textures, warm lighting, and specific scents can signal to your brain that this is a safe zone, triggering that dopamine release you don't get from a nightclub. Lastly, practice JOMO, the joy of missing out. We are conditioned to have FOMO, fear of missing out, thinking that everyone else is having the time of their lives without us. But the reality is, half the people at that party wish they were in sweatpants too. Embrace the joy of knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be, safe, warm, and authentic. If you are someone who feels a rush of happiness when a plan gets canceled, or if your perfect Friday night involves a blanket and zero obligations, you are not broken. You are simply wired for depth rather than breadth. You prioritize peace over performance. In a world that is shouting to be heard, there is immense power in being the one who quietly listens, mostly to themselves. I'm curious, and I want you to answer this honestly in the comments below. Is your staying home a form of self-care, or is it sometimes a form of hiding? There is no wrong answer, but acknowledging it is the first step to understanding yourself. And if you have a friend who you haven't seen in a while because they are always busy, maybe send them this video. It might be the best way to say, I see you, and it's okay.